attempt in the films that we've created over the last 3 years has been to set a framework for you to understand the market and the major influences into the marketplace. We look at things from a big picture. The purpose of this film is to anticipate the next round of crises. We are not beyond the crisis. And there are several factors which need to be taken into account, particularly as they develop in the political sphere, which you need to pay attention to, you need to care about. If you haven't up to this point, you may not know what's at jeopardy. We'd like to share some things with you that will shed light on that today. The point of looking at economic issues specifically and drawing the distinction between economic and financial is because we're talking about the impact into individual lives. It's in the political sphere that you find individuals expressing their angst, their frustration, their ire, their sense of insecurity. And so before we get to the political crisis and decisions that are being made on Wall Street and Washington jointly today, it's important to look at the individuals being impacted. Those who are currently unemployed, those who are fearing being unemployed, those who are concerned about their mortgage payments, those who are looking ahead and saying, how do I exist on fixed income? It's individuals that we care about when we're discussing economics. The markets are, on their own, very frail. You can consider them to be like a human being with a complex emotional structure. Once the system has been fractured, it takes next to nothing for an implosion. So if the markets have something of an emotional life, then it's easy to understand how bull markets and bear markets relate. A bull market is where there is a tremendous amount of trust extended and more confidence is built into the marketplace over time. When you enter into a bear market, trust has been broken and it takes some time to rebuild. You should never expect there to be a recovery on the other side of a breaking of trust on an instantaneous basis. Usually bear markets last 10 to 15 years, and I don't think this bear market will be any different. We are in the context of a structural bear market that should last to 2014 to 2015. That's if all goes well. Because markets are driven by people, and people, whether they like to admit it or not, are driven by emotions. The two errors that are often made in the markets, and certainly in the business cycle, you see both of these occur. When people should recognize danger and recognize risk in the marketplace, they ignore it completely and hold on to hope. When, on the other hand, they should step with confidence into the market, that is when they are most scared. It's our suggestion that 2014, 2015 may in fact be one of the most ideal times to be transitioning back into the equity market. Between now and then, do we see carnage? Unfortunately, we do. It is with great trepidation that an investor today needs to focus on asset preservation, but be aware of themselves as investors, as emotional people, subject to both errors, the error of optimism, hanging on to hope too long, and the error of pessimism, throwing in the towel and quitting utterly at just the wrong time. The jobless recovery. We don't need more employed people. All we need is more people out there spending, and we'll jumpstart the economy. All we have to do is buy time, and things will heal themselves. It's a natural desire to want to improve your income, to want to improve your lifestyle. Household debt has grown to 100% of GDP. Columbia professor David Beam has this to say: the problem is us. The problem is not the banks, greedy though they may be, overpaid though they may be. The problem is us. We've been living very high on the hog. Our living standard has been rising dramatically in the last 25 years, and we've been borrowing much of the money to make that prosperity happen. If you go back to the original models that we use to count unemployment, we still have 21 to 22% unemployment. The idea that we can have a robust recovery is based on the US government filling the gap and spending and spending and spending, which actually is reasonable as long as we have a healthy balance sheet to start with. We have finished one of the worst financial crises since the 1930s, but the government has to spend our way out of it as if our balance sheet can afford the additional spending. and it cannot. Is housing recovering? It's a good question. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were nationalized, 79.9% of the stock taken by the U.S. government, the Treasury, and given a $100 billion backstop. By February of 2009, we saw a $200 billion backstop given, and December 25th, 2009, Merry Christmas, an unlimited backstop for 3 years. Why an unlimited credit line if things are in fact getting better? What gives us some indication that there is a recovery in housing, which we would totally disagree with? It would have to be the $100 billion per month that the U.S. government spent in monetizing mortgage-backed security paper and in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac paper to keep that market even alive. We're just getting to the disclosure portion of the cycle where banks are beginning to purge properties on a quicker pace, primarily in the residential space. That has yet to occur in the commercial space. The similarities between now and 1931 and 32 are uncanny. What made the Great Depression was a banking crisis, 1931 and forward, and the government's response to that particular crisis. We haven't cleaned the system out yet, and the banks still have yet to be purged of the bad loans still on the books. If we don't, we're looking at 10 to 20 years of zombie banking like we've had in Japan. The question is the next decade or two going to look more like Japan or Zimbabwe? We're going into a debt liquidation cycle, not a debt expansion cycle. Is it the second lost decade, following in line with the Japanese? Or are we on a course, as some analysts have written, towards hyperinflation? It means that at the long end of the yield curve, you're going to see rates significantly higher. Our borrowing costs currently average about 2.4%. Will jump to anywhere from 4 to 8%. Instead of spending $187 billion in interest payments, we'll be spending $375 to $500 billion in interest alone. Write this down. Fiat Money Inflation in France. Andrew Dixon White. This is a book that will explain the hyperinflation in France and is only about an 80-page commitment. If you want a better understanding of what inflation looks like, its impact, by all means, read the book. Two important factors to remember from the French hyperinflation are that, one, there was a significant decrease in tax revenue, and number two, there was a significant increase in government expenditure. They had to print money to do that. By 1797, they defaulted on 2/3 of their debt. The game was up.